basically, this is gonna be a little different than some of the other streams I've done, where I'm like laser focused on a specific feature, and I know exactly how I want that feature to work, and I make like a step-by-step list of all the like 15-minute things that we need to do to get to that feature, and then, you know, we spend an hour and a half going through the first 6 steps of that list. In this case, like, I basically have more of like a design goal, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to get to that goal, and so it's going to be a lot of little experiments in which we like try and see if different things like get us closer or not to the goal. And like maybe this will be like a kind of like parade of hilarious failures, or maybe this will like open up some interesting opportunities. But basically, I've been running scenes up until now, which have had very sort of like simple gameplay goals. Like there's a tutorial scene, which is simply about establishing the player controls and the basic mechanics of like moving and shooting, and a simple combat scene that makes you feel good about using the controls. And then for Glitch Arcade at the end of last year, we did a public demo, which was more about like just creating a big chaotic scene, like the idea that you're dropped into the middle of a sort of like battle that is sort of unfurling in every direction, and you're just kind of scrambling. And I was interested if we could like sort of create that sort of feeling of being in the middle of a fracas, or like a really chaotic situation. And like I think that one was somewhat successful in the sense that like it's very kinetic and people felt very energized and got a bunch of dopamine hits playing it. Also, the space was large enough that there was more to discover than you could find in a single playthrough, so it rewarded having 2 or 3 replays in which you can sort of like optimize where you go or where you explore to get a better result. But I didn't really think that like the combat had a very high ceiling. You know, I think it's still dominated by what you might call a kind of RNG effect, where between like the limitations on the enemy's movement relative to how quickly you can fly and move around, as well as the way in which they sort of like form squads and then randomly take turns taking shots at you, and like you not really having enough situational awareness to know who's aiming at you, when they're going to shoot, after they shoot, how long before it hurts you. Like you couldn't really form a coherent strategy on like just sort of avoiding that kind of like combat chaos. And so that was fine for like making a scene that's supposed to feel chaotic, but now I'm wondering if we're able to make a scene that feels more deliberate, where it's sort of like an intentionally simpler space, right? Like I've made basically just this circular arena, and also that like you understand all the elements that are in the scene, and so like you can make a plan, or like if something goes wrong, you feel a little more responsible for like failing to meet the moment. So in this case, my thought was that there's one big enemy, which is this tripod right here, which is constantly threatening you with kind of bullet hell elements. Like it's constantly spraying a lot of slow moving bullets that essentially create moving areas of exclusion, so you can't stand still. Like it's not hard necessarily to dodge the bullets, but you can't ignore them, right? Like you have to keep some process in your mind of like, okay, you know, where is it safe, where is it not safe? And then the second element that will create like a trade-off in tension is that along the boundary of this level, I want to basically have spawners for smaller enemies. And those are basically just like drip faucets that are just constantly adding more and more little guys into the scene, with the goal being that the player feels this tension of like wanting to chip away at the big enemy that is the primary goal, which like maybe you have a time limit, and so you can't just ignore them. But on the other hand, you can't also ignore the smaller enemies, because if you don't deal with them, then there will be more and more of them, and they'll kind of like flood the zone. And so like you need to sort of like code switch between like, am I dealing with the big guy or am I dealing with the small guys? And you can't ignore the big guy, but also like if you're dealing with the small guys, you still need to be cognizant of just the omnipresent threat of like the bullet hell, of all this like slow moving like exclusive elements that are like forcing you to either like fly or not fly, right? Like we can flood the air with bullets to make it dangerous to fly and force you onto the ground. We can flood the ground with bullets to force you up into the air. And then potentially we can also create like interesting patterns, which maybe like lock you into a tunnel, but there's like gaps in the tunnel, and so you like want to get out of the tunnel by like jumping through one of those gaps. When I was posting about this in prep for the stream, I referenced Returnal, which I think is kind of like a double-edged sword reference. I think it like looks really cool the way that they did this kind of like 3D bullet hell stuff. But I think the other end of that blade is that like I don't think their bullet hell gameplay was actually that fun. So like I'm like using it as like okay, it's like interesting that other people with bigger budgets have thought about this and struggled to come up with an answer. So is there like something we can do which is like a little more creative, like something that a AAA studio like wouldn't touch because it's maybe too risky for their art pipelines or whatever, which like we as scrappy indie devs can exploit. So it's like a point of departure. I'm not just trying to like remake another game that already did a perfectly cromulent version of the mechanic. But yeah, there's also certainly like a bunch of other references like to think about. But that's basically the thing. So just to sort of like write it all out, right? What we want is one big enemy. Oh, this text is so large. Spraying bullet hell patterns. We want 3 or 4 like spawner faucets of smaller enemies. Oh, and by the way, another thing that like why I'm thinking about this is just this idea of like last week on the stream we made this super weapon, this like laser that like lets you just like totally like annihilate huge groups of small enemies. And like I was trying to think of like an appropriate way to deploy that, and like this is also sort of leaning into that, right? Because if you think about super weapons in like shmups or like shoot 'em ups, right? Like the role that they serve is like in a game which is all about like sort of slowly ratcheting up tension until you feel like you're about to lose it. You know, the super weapon just clears the screen and like makes you invincible for a second and like lets you have like an oasis of calm, right? So it's not just like, oh, this weapon is cool and it makes me feel cool to use it, but it's I'm giving it to you when you're at your lowest, right? And so going from your lowest point to like your highest point of elation is like an extra hard dopamine hit, right? It's like it makes all the frustration of the bullet hell elements worth it to then have this sort of celebratory moment. So I'm also trying to think of like, how do you create a situation in which the player feels under tension and like it's like a little bit beyond their ability to keep it under control. So like the faucets are like speeding up, or like the big enemies bullet patterns are getting more sophisticated, right? And so we can sort of slowly boil the player until they're like about to go, and like that's when you give them the super laser, and then it feels that much more like incredible, right, to get something cool like that. So that's what it's really about. It's about being able to keep the player in a state of tension, right? And I do think that like, you know, in shmups, tension is created by having conflicting goals. Like I want to move the player away from the bullets and the zones of like exclusion that are created by the enemies, but I do want to move them to places where I can shoot, the enemy, right? And so the conflict between those two goals, right? Because it's like if you just don't shoot, if you are only avoiding bullets, then more and more enemies are going to spawn and there's going to be more and more bullets and then you're going to be squeezed out, right? So it's that same thing where you have two conflicting goals, you're creating a state of tension, and then you're like giving people a release from that tension. That's sort of the the pusher strategy here. So yeah, there's one big enemy, which is this tripod, which I'll have like spraying bullet hell patterns. And then we'll have 3 or 4 spawner faucets of smaller enemies. So I think the smaller enemies are going to be the gnats, like the little floating TIE fighter guys, or they could be the chicken walkers, which are those kind of like, you know, Macross, like Zentradi battle pod mechs that we have. So yeah, these are like, yeah, basically, you know, create like tension by having goals in conflict. And then release tension by dropping super weapons. Yeah. Additionally, like, because as you pick up weapon upgrades, you keep them until you take damage, right? Like the weapon upgrades are another case of like, you know, creating two conflicting situations where like you want to have the weapon upgrades, but like the more weapon upgrades you have, the more nervous you are about taking damage, because then it's not just that, you know, you're potentially going to lose, you know, because your health bar goes down a little, but also you're resetting your weapon upgrades, and then you know you're going to have to scramble to get more weapon upgrades. So anyway, those are the high level goals, but those aren't like necessarily specific tasks, right? So like when thinking about the big enemy spraying the bullet, right, we need to basically we're going to be like experimenting rather than knocking off a checklist. So like experiment with patterns, experiment with bullet dynamics. By bullet dynamics, I mean stuff like if you've ever used Bullet ML, which is like a library for making sort of bullet hell type shmup games. In addition to saying like, yeah, you can create patterns by the timing, the position, and the direction and speed of the bullet. You can also control those patterns with dynamics like, after a certain delay, do they change direction? Do they have an acceleration? Like, are they speeding up over time? Are they slowing down over time? So, yeah. And then I would also think, like, experiment with emitters, question mark. Or I guess not emitters, but just this, like, just thinking about, like, experimenting with, like, shootable parts, right? Like, you know, are we just here? Let me like actually spawn in and play this level. Like right now, you know, I can like shoot and like, what's happening? You know, nothing is actually receiving damage. Am I sort of intentionally trying to shoot like attachments that are placed on these legs? Is it attachments that are placed in the middle? Does it have defensive maneuvers? Like, what am I shooting when I'm shooting this dingus? And then also like experimenting with like, you know, the tripod movement. So right now, you know, I just have them like sitting pretty on one end. You know, I imagine what probably makes sense is that if you get too close, then it's going to like scramble to the far side of the arena from you. So it's going to like always try and like keep distance, right? And maybe when it scrambles, it also releases a big like bloom of bullets. So like you begin to intuit like, oh, I should stay like away from, like I shouldn't actually get too close to this enemy. So, and then for the smaller enemies, you know, they use gnats, they use chicken walkers. Do we like change their like attack logic? Because, you know, right now they just wander around until you get close enough to them, and then, you know, all the aggro ones take turns just shooting directly at you. Does that make sense? Is there like a different attack logic? Is there like better ways of doing them? Because like right now they all kind of cluster together and they move as like a big like blob of guys. You know, should there be like better squad logic, like the way that multiple enemies coordinate with each other? So, you know, squad logic. And then, you know, the other thing I might think about with these dinguses is, oh, it was just in my head a second ago, and now it's disappearing. This is the attack logic, there's their movement, there's their squad logic. I'm blanking, I don't know. But yeah, and then like by having goals in conflict, I think like a big part of this is like having like off-screen like HUD warnings to basically let you know I'm looking at one thing, but I'm being warned off-screen about something else, right? So I think that like makes legible without me being sort of very didactic to players like what the goal is. And then for like these weapon drops, like drop by defeating enemies, dropped by random spawns. Who knows? We need to think about it. You know, sometimes in shmups, there's like some type of support plane that just like flies across the middle of the screen, and there's like a special power up and you need to like shoot that and then grab it. I think maybe we do something like that here where there's like special power up like drones, which will just like fly, you know, through the scene, and like once you see it you're like, oh shit, I want to go shoot that guy down and then grab the power up from them. You know, maybe it's a weapon upgrade power up. Oh heck, maybe it's like a super laser power up. That would be cool. So yeah, I can show you where it's at right now. I've already set up basically some, as you saw, like simple animation control for this tripod enemy, as well as some simple AI logic. So right now, when you're far away from it, it just kind of idles. It's in a searching state. And then when I get close to it, it begins just shooting basically bullets forward. And I like specifically designed these. These kind of look like bullet hell from Nier Automata or from Returnal or whatever. I think that's something I want to like experiment with. I don't necessarily love it, but you can see they're very slow moving. They're rapid and they're regular. So they do, you know, like I was saying, they create an area of exclusion. They create this like curve in space. They're like, I can be anywhere but there. And like I can fly under it, I can fly over it. But like if I just foolishly like stand still, then like eventually, oh, this dingus does not seem very good at like getting me. Wait, if I'm standing on the ground, there we go. If I'm drifting in the air, he should be able to get me though. Why are they always behind? I guess maybe instead of shooting directly at me, it should be like dead reckoning my position a little bit, but we'll see. Oh, I remember what the other thing I wanted to think about was. It was these off-screen HUD warnings, but also like thinking about, you know, camera lock kind of mechanics. So I can actually I have like a soft camera lock that you can activate. And what this does, you can see, I still have like full camera control. It can go off screen. It's not like a hard Z lock like in Legend of Zelda or Nier Automata. But as I like fly around it, you can see the camera actually rotates. There's like a leashing relationship between you and it. So like if you strafe, instead of just strafing sideways, you end up strafing like around the enemy. And like in particular, that position is going to stay at a constant screen position, so I don't have to move my aiming reticle to like keep hitting the same spot. So I do wonder, like, maybe you just auto lock onto, because like this is like another thing, right? Like a lot of times these kind of like 3D bullet hell mechanics are simplified by essentially creating a 2.5D situation, like in Star Fox, where the camera is locked to a rail instead of being in the free fly regions. that makes it easier to like frame which enemies are in frame, which bullets are in frame, and stuff like that. So like maybe having the camera auto lock to the enemy and having that auto lock have a little bit more sort of like intentional control over the camera could improve how you reckon with the bullet patterns. I think another thing, here, wait, let me bring up my list. I also want to experiment with like bullet material or shader. So basically, like right now they're just like glowing dots. The only way you can really tell if it's closer or further away is via foreshortening, so like the ones that are further away are just smaller on the screen. The ones that are closer to you are larger. So you see when they're coming directly at us. But it's like not that much of a difference, right? I think maybe they're getting like 30% larger. I think that's very subtle. Instead, what I'd like to do is maybe have them be darker in the distance and then get brighter as they get close to you, and then, you know, hopefully, you know, that works as like a color cue for the depth, especially once we have like a lot of them. TXK says, do you have like kill streak combo counters to get special drops? Yeah, I do have a combo counter, like how many basically kill streaks you have in between taking damage. I've just been using that for basically like end of round, like, whoa, here's all your cool statistics. But yeah, that's definitely something that we can look at too. I definitely think like you're gonna need to have, I'll only spawn like weapon upgrades until you're fully upgraded, and then I'll spawn super weapons. So if you're just taking damage and you can't hold on to 2 weapon upgrades, then like you're just not gonna get, you know, the super laser, right? But we'll see. I have been talking for so long and I've been doing so little actual development, and people have actually shown up. So hello Spectre of Starman, hello Teekske, hello Yuli Reanimated, hello Tyler. Welcome to the stream. So basically, yeah, I think I'm gonna start. This is like, all of this stuff is like a week's worth of work. It's not gonna be done in the next hour and a half that we have on stream before I start going, ooh, I'm so hungry, I wanna get lunch. I didn't know Twitch notifies you of lurker. Well, I mean, I have the like admin, so I can see the viewer list. But yeah, cool. So I think for now what I want to focus on is this like main tripod guy. I don't know that I'm going to get into these like smaller enemies, HUD stuff, or like weapon drops yet. I think it's like more interesting to start with like just thinking about bullet hell patterns. So like you can have, obviously, you know, we've got this like stream of them right now, which, as I'm already observing, could be improved. I think if I'm just drifting like this slow drift should not be fast enough to avoid getting hit. So that's something to think about. And then additionally, see, the character animation / camera work are phenomenally great, by the way. Oh, thank you very much. I've been refining it bit by bit over the course of the year, so I'm feeling pretty good about the like sort of game feel parts of things. Now I want to really dial in like strategy and skill ceiling, which is gonna, I mean, that's gonna like go back and affect game feel and other things, but I'm feeling pretty good about that as well. I'm glad that other people acknowledge it. So I think first things first, I might just do what I was talking about, where we add like a depth fade to the bullets, so that bullets that are closer to the camera are going to be glowing more, and bullets that are further away from the camera are going to be glowing less. So let's actually go into that bullet. I call them bullet hell orbs. So the way that I've engineered bullets to work in my game, and I can show you the code for this, is that I don't really have individual bullet objects because I spawn like hundreds, maybe thousands of bullets. That would be prohibitively expensive. So instead I have objects called bullet managers, and this basically represents one object for each type of bullet, right? So like in the scene right now, there's 2 bullet managers. There's one bullet manager for like those fireballs that the tripod's shooting, and then there's another bullet manager for these bullets that the player is shooting, right? And the way that those bullet managers work, if I like go in to look at it, is that they have an instance static mesh component associated with them. Oh, excuse me. This basically lets you take one reference mesh and then stamp out a bunch of copies of it. So I've got like one mesh for the bullet, and then it stamps out tons of meshes for like all the bullets in the scene. And then basically all of the bullets of a particular type are like updated here in like one big loop, right? So instead of having an individual update for each bullet, I have like one update, which is like update all the fireballs, and then another update, which is like update all the player bullets. And then additionally, you can see they use what's called asynchronous traces. So way down here, this is really getting in the weeds, but I like talking about this stuff. Instead of like ray tracing directly against collision to like immediately get a hit, what happens is at the end of the frame, I compute where the bullet is going to be in the next frame, and then I queue up like an asynchronous trace. And then that is processed by like a background thread, which is like, you know, quote unquote free real estate, where like the physics engine can do batches of them, right? So it can do like 100 of them at a time or whatever, and like get big groups of results. And then in the beginning of the update, before I move the bullet to that next position, I check all the queries that were queued up in the previous frame, and that's how we determine like any impacts. Spectre of Starman says, where do you find the pool size? I grow the pools dynamically. I like basically double the size of the pool every time you overflow it, but I do have this reserve count right here, which is when the bullet pool is created, I like reserve that many. So if like I know I have an enemy that's going to like immediately spray out 1,000 bullets, I'm not going to wait for it to allocate like 1, 2, 4, 8 or whatever. I think I start by default with a pool size of 8 and then double from there, but I don't want it to have to go like 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024. I finally found the pool size. If I know it's going to spray out a bunch, I will like immediately reserve a bunch. But then I have to basically just like all the unused bullets have to basically be whatchamacallit, scaled down to 0, 0 so that they're basically hidden and like off screen and not simulating or anything. So I do a little bit of like trickery to keep everything relatively fast. That was like a year ago in which I wrote the basic bullet stuff to handle all of that. Another nice thing about my bullet system is that it's frame rate independent. So like when you spawn a bullet, you can give it a time phase. And that basically lets you say like, oh, I'm going to pretend I spawned this bullet a half a second in the past or whatever. Just so that it's like the timing is exactly lined up. So I can actually show you Mechapon Tripod is the main AI class for this big guy. And you can see, right, when he exits his spawning state, where is it? He like makes sure that like we have actually allocated a bullet pool for this type of bullet, and we get a reference to that. You know, we get a reference this way because like multiple enemies with the same type of bullet share the same pool. But then, yeah, so when we go down here to actually shoot, the way that I'm shooting right now is I'm setting like a shooting deadline, which is like a timestamp, right? So when I enter my pivot state, I'm saying, hey, 1 second in the future, I want that to be the next time you take a shot, right? And then every update, which is, 60 FPS or maybe faster or maybe slower depending on performance, we're going to be able to call, shooting time elapsed, which is like how much time has, what's the difference between the current game time and this timestamp. And then I check if that shooting time is greater than or equal to 0, right? Because if that number is negative, that means the shooting time is still in the future. But if that's positive, that means like, oh, it's been like 0.01 seconds since the shooting time, right? Which can happen because maybe in the previous frame it was too early to shoot, but in the next frame it was too late to shoot or whatever, right? And then you can see whenever I basically pass the deadline, I increment the shooting deadline by just 0.1 seconds. So they're firing every 0.1 seconds right now. And then I spawn a bullet and I pass in negative shooting time as the time phase. So I'm like, oh, if this bullet was like logically fired a little bit in the past, by like some subframe amount, like we're like actually going to advance you like a little bit. So that's how, when these bullets are spawned, there's no sort of like irregularity due to like maybe the frame rate changing. Like you're getting just this sort of like perfect line of bullets. So, and then you can see I'm basically just shooting them in the direction of the pose. The pose of the character is actually the pose of this central section. That's the actual position of the character that I'm sort of moving and rotating in its AI. The legs are just like an animation controller that are like automatically figuring out like it's called inverse kinematics, but they're figuring out a pose that will attach this point, like this joint on the side of the mech to this ground contact on the ground. And you can see those also, like when it can't find the solution to that because it would be too stretched out, it like actually picks up its legs and takes little steps in order to move them into better positions to find that solution. So that's just a little digression into how the procedural animation works. But let's see, Spectre of Starman says, impressively organized / thought. I mean, I didn't think it out all at once. It was just, I needed something, and then I hurt my brain to figure it out, and then I figured it out, and then I implemented it, and through the slow accumulation of iterations, you accumulate all these like clever things. I worked on a game at Heart Machine called Solar Ash, which had these giant monsters that were like level scale creatures, and we did very similar techniques there. So I also, read a bunch of SIGGRAPH papers and learned a bunch of like animation algorithms working on that project, which I then sort of brought that expertise into this project. So everything is building on stuff in the past. Anyway, so the material. So the material on the bullets is just assigned to this instant static mesh component. It's actually MI Fireball Dissolve, which is actually I found a like an asset pack that just had a bunch of like particles. So that's where this, basically it's quite a lot of work on the VFX side to build stuff from scratch. But like it also like kind of sucks to just buy asset packs and then worry that your game is going to look exactly like another game that also used that asset pack. So I've kind of been like in the middle, basically like getting asset packs, but then modifying all the materials, modifying all the meshes to make them a little bit more stylized and a little bit more anime and a little bit more distinct, and also so that they all kind of like fit in the space together, right? You can see I've got this like space station part that's ringed around here, which is a little off model for my game. I don't do this much like grody detailing. So probably at some point I'm going to simplify this mesh and simplify this material. But that's just sort of a peek behind the curtain. Obviously you're comfortable writing game code. Do you also ever write your own shaders, or do you prefer this kind of graph editor stuff? Well, in Unreal, Most shader work is done with, I mean, this is what we're going to be looking at in a second here, but these like shading graphs, which are, these are essentially shaders. Like what happens is you hook all this stuff up, Unreal generates shaders for all the different platforms that it supports. So it generates a GLSL shader, it generates an HLSL shader, it generates a SPURV like Vulkan shader, it generates like a metal shader for Apple platforms, right? And then it compiles them natively. So this is actually kind of just like a high-level shading language. The main thing about it, though, is that you can see you're always plugging into an output node here, which is some type of shading model, quote unquote. And you can think of that as basically being like Mad Libs, right? So there's a bunch of slots in each shading model, and you're plugging your own custom logic into those slots. So certain things like lighting calculations, which are more tied into their render and are more complicated, those are handled internally by the engine, right? You don't control the lighting model directly, but you can control most of the calculations that then, you use that lighting information to actually do it. So these are pretty like high, they call them materials, but they're actually pretty like high level shaders, is what you're really doing. The only time you would actually edit shader code in Unreal is if you're making a new lighting model. That's not necessarily like hard, and it's like actually pretty easy to just copy paste one of the existing lighting models and then like modify it if you want to do like, toon shading or something that like quantizes the colors. But it's just like, I have limited programming bandwidth, and I don't want to have to maintain patches that have to be resolved every time I take upgrades to the engine. So I've basically been limiting myself to just material effects for now. But like I was saying, making new materials, making new particle systems from scratch is just like a lot of labor. That's just like, oh, I'm going to be spending the next 4 hours doing this, but only have budgeted for 1 hour because I'm just one person and I've got a million tasks to do, and I'm foolishly developing like a high quality game as a solo indie dev with zero money. So like, I'm like, take the scrappier approach, which is what we're about to see right now, which is I'm just going to copy paste this file, and then I'm going to modify it to add the effects that I want. So let's do that right now. I'm going to, so this toon mask mesh effect that was in this pack, we're just going to hit Control D and call our new one M, and we'll just call this material bullet L orb. Save that, and now we are going to move that into our bullet hell subdirectory. So we're going to move it here. Boop, 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 boop. We're going to come in here. We're going to open that. Now this is the material we are going to modify. Now one of the things that how materials work is that you can create input parameters in your material, and then when you make material instances, you can create like variants of the material that change those parameters. So you can see in this one, there's like a number of things that they've modified in order to get not just this like black and white effect, but to actually get this fire effect. So let's go plug those in. They changed the inside color to this value. So let's find that. There we go, inside color. I think I can right click and say paste. I guess not. But what I can do is we can come in here and I can copy the hex linear, go in here and paste the hex linear. There, that makes, as this in color, that controls the inside colors. That's what makes the interior of it red. And there's outside color, which I assume is producing this sort of outer color here. That one is also red, but you see when I look at the color in Unreal here, it's like got this sort of like to white gradient. That's what happens when you plug in, as you see here, like values that are in excess of like, I have a value that's greater than 1, right? Like we have a value that's 25. Normally value is just 0 to 1, right? Like there's 1. So you'd see 1 is just this kind of like orangish color. But then when you say 25, what you're saying is like, I want this to be brighter than bright, right? Because this is a HDR, a high dynamic range pipeline, which means you can specify colors that are outside of the normal color range. And what happens when the lighting model is trying to handle colors that whose like value is greater than 1 is that it blooms, right? So the color itself becomes brighter, but it also starts making pixels outside the color brighter as well. That's this like aura that you're seeing around here. All of that's produced when you're trying to basically write out colors that are like too bright, right? It's like it's smearing out into neighboring colors. So this is like, what is this, 109625 is what they put in there. So we can say 10.9625, and now we have that sort of like bright bloom happening in our new base material. What else did they override? They overrode some of this flow stuff. So there's flow texture. I'm assuming flow texture is, yeah, like if we look at it, it looks like this is basically just a pattern that their shader is using to produce this like they're scrolling through this, right? So they're plugging in scrolling UVs and then using that to modulate between the two colors to produce this like warbly lava effect. So what they've done is they've grabbed this texture they made called Fractal Tile 1 and plugged that in instead, so we can come in here. Okay, it just like is a slightly different flow, I guess. But they also changed texture power. Where did that come from? Flow U, flow V. Twist value, did they change that? They didn't change that. Here we go. Power. So there's a Fresnel. Fresnel is basically the aspect of a material that highlights surfaces as they face away from the camera, right? So the Fresnel is 0 when a surface is pointing at the camera. A Fresnel is 1 when you're orthogonal to the camera. So it creates a rim shading effect. You know, if you've ever played any games on the Nintendo Wii, they didn't have shaders, but it did have a built-in Fresnel option that you could apply to anything. That's why like everybody in Wii Sports appears to be rim shaded. So power here is basically, you know, we're instead of just getting like a linear response, power is basically by feeding it values between 0 and 1, you can pull up the low end, and by feeding it values greater than 1, you can pull down the low end and create like something that's like you can basically sharpen it. So it looks like they were going with a power of 8, which, yeah, you can see that really sharpens it. Was that really? Oh no, they did a power of 2. So you can see 8 makes the rim way sharper. They did 0.2, which actually has the effect of like making it like so blurry that you can barely see it. I think what we actually need to do is I need to grab the mesh that I'm actually using for the bullets, and in my material I want to set that as my preview mesh. So here we go. You can see my bullet mesh is like way lower res than the default sphere because there's so many bullets. I just don't want to have like a million particles times a million vertices, right? But it also used, wait, this was flow texture power, and this is Fresnel power. Oh, that's it. So they had Fresnel power, they just left it at 1. Okay. But then they had sphere mask. I think they meant to say radius, but whoever made this pack type radials, it's like a typo. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. Flow texture power. This is the one that was 0.2. Okay, so that is the same sort of thing, right? Like they're applying the power node to the texture. So you can make it sharper by giving it values that are greater than 1, and you can make it thicker by giving it values that are less than 1. Maybe for our, this is maybe like 0.4 is a good value for our specific mesh. Cluedaz says you made this material high. I was explaining earlier, basically, I'm like a single indie dev. I have no funding. So I would love to make materials from scratch, but I just don't have the time for it. So, like, I went into like Fab, which is like Epic's like marketplace. I bought some like generic stylized assets. And then essentially what I do is I break down all the pieces of these, you know, pre-made materials. I figure out the parts that I want to modify, and then I just sort of like add my own features, right? So, you know, I like take something which is like 80% of what I want, and then I do the last 20% of the work to like harmonize it with the game. Can you give me the name of that pack? Let's see. This was called Stylized FX5 is what it was called. And it was a bunch of just like generic things. It's like, here's some generic fire, here's some generic lightning. Okay, so the last thing they modified was this sphere mask radius, which they sent to 0.5. So what does sphere mask do? Let's see. Here, can I just like search sphere mask? Oh, I can't type. Here it is. So they have it at 0.6, and this is multiplying various things. So they say to 0.5, they took it down. I made it 0, 0.1, 0.2. Okay, I guess this is just a multiplier on like how much you can see in the middle of these. 0.3, 0.5, 0.6, 1, 2. Yeah, so like higher values are basically just going to make the brighter color dominate. 0 is basically going to almost totally get rid of that brighter color. I think for our purposes, I think it's nicer to have it act more like a rim, but then to have that like color in the middle, that's pretty nice. Now, one thing that I don't love about this material is just how totally flat it is. I'm kind of wondering if I might use an inverse Fresnel in this middle part, and I can use that to basically add like a little bit of like a glow in the middle. So let's try that. Let's take this inside color. Let's see if I just take like a Fresnel node, and then I do like base is 0, and I do 1 minus, and then we just basically, we're gonna like lerp. Actually, I don't need 1 minus. I can just take the Fresnel and pass that through a lerp. And then when the Fresnel is 0, that means you're in the front, so I want that to be a little brighter, so I'll make that 1.2. And then on the sides, I'll leave it at 1. And then we'll multiply this. So I'm going to grab this noodle, I'm going to pull it out here, and instead we're going to plug into this. I'm not really seeing it. What if the middle's like 2? Okay, maybe this exponent just needs to be different. Make it 20. Maybe multiplying is not exactly what I want. This is all very interesting. This is not working how I would expect. Right click, where's it? Start previewing node. Yeah, so you can see it's got the like glowy that I would expect, but whatever this dingus is doing is not enough. I mean, maybe it is in there and we're just having a hard time seeing it. 1. If I went really crazy and went -1 on the sides. Very curious. This gets plugged into like a bunch of other stuff. It's also using, Okay, so this was meant actually for particles. I am not actually using this as a particle system, so I want to get rid of this particle input. So let's do a little surgery here. Let's see. It's multiplying the particle input. We can just skip that. So that gets rid of that noodle. And then the alpha for the particle is being multiplied into these two places. So in these cases, we can just skip over the multiply. And then this one, that simplifies the shader a bit. So then, let's see. We're doing a lerp from the inside color to the outside color based on a sphere mask, and then that's just being plugged directly in here. Okay. So actually, it is happening. It's just so incredibly subtle the way that I've set it up. Yeah, this is what I needed. I needed to like really drag down the exponent. This is the same thing that I was saying before, like, you know, giving this values less than 1, that is going to pull up the high end, but I'm doing like the opposite of a Fresnel, so that's actually the inverse of what you would expect. Strange that the exponent needs to be reduced like that. Well, like I'm thinking about the inside here rather than the rim. So like I was saying, it's like the reciprocal of the power is like what I would normally think of. Cool. So can come back here. Yeah, now this is looking a bit better. I like that effect a lot more. And I don't need to pull this all the way down to 0. We can leave that like 0.25. Maybe make it 1.5, 0.05. That's looking a bit nicer. So, let's come back. I don't think there was anything. Oh, and then they have opacity. They have a static switch, which is what they call dissolve. So what is that effect? So you can optionally specify a mask. I'll probably get rid of that. And then they also have this dissolve. Is it desired to have a non-round ball? No, I want to leave these as round. Because here, I'll show like a extremely dumb version of like what I'm sort of reacting to. I'm searching off screen. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Oop, oop. Yeah, you can see it's like in Returnal, right? How they had these very similar like Fresnel orbs, right? Now, like what I don't like about what you're seeing on the screen right now is just how like illegible it all is. Like, I think there's too many particles, and like they're not communicating depth very well, right? Like you can see, oh, it's closer because it's bigger, right? But like, what is the area of exclusion? It's actually like not, the area of exclusion is not that complicated. It's kind of random, and the character has so little like movement control that like it doesn't matter. Whereas like I want to do something like a little sort of more interesting. So anyway, let's go all the way. So like they did a thing where they, I guess, turned dissolve on, which, oh, I guess the difference there is, yeah, so dissolve in their case is basically just letting you see through. Like they've got a mask here and they let you see through parts of it. I don't actually think I want dissolve on our bullets. offsets. So we're just going to turn that off. So actually, I think everything being plugged into opacity mask here can just go. And I don't need this to be masked. I can just say that this is opaque. And now I can just start pruning all of this unnecessary stuff, right? And dissolve here didn't really matter. I guess they were experimenting, and then it turns out they didn't need either of that. So we can just give that a normal sphere mask. I think everything has basically been removed. That cleans the shader up a lot. Oh, it was removed by you. Oh yeah, that's true. Whatever. The most important thing is that I always like copy and then prune and modify these. I don't like modify them in place because I always want to be able to just have the unmodified original asset. So, cool. So now we've got all this stuff. Oh, mask texture is not in use anymore. We can get rid of that. Cool. So I could clean all these noodles up, but I don't really care too much to. What I really care about though is when the object is further away, I want it to basically be darker. So let's just try to or at least like fade them. Like I might like hue shift them towards a cooler color and make it darker. But for now, I think all I'm gonna do is just, here, we're gonna get depth. So what is depth fade? Depth fade expression is used to hide unsightly seams that take place when translucent objects. That is not at all what I want. I want like, pixel depth, right? What's the difference between pixel depth and seam depth? Camera fade, you say? Camera depth fade. That looks pretty good. Creates a gradient of 0 near the camera and white at the fade length, used to prevent particles from camera clipping particles. That's strange. Pixel depth is the distance from the camera or the pixel currently being rendered. Let's try camera depth fade. So let's set the fade length to the scalar parameter. We're going to say their fade length is about, right now my arena is about 8. If we go back to the arena here, I think this is about 8,000 units from side to side, but we can measure that. So if I go into top, and I think, yeah, if I just middle mouse button click. Let's see, distance, camera position pixel divided by distance. Okay. Yeah, this is from side to side 100 meters, right? So 10,000 units. Oh, we can get rid of this fireball dissolve thing. That doesn't matter. I don't know what you're doing, what texture streaming data means, but I'm going to trash it anyway, so it doesn't matter. I guess fade offset is like a start distance. So let's say 8,000, or actually let's say 6,000 total distance, and then we'll create a scalar parameter. We'll name you start dist, and then this is fade dist. We can give you a fade distance of maybe 4,000, 2,000. So this is a little less than the total diameter of the arena. Cool. So now let me just try and like multiply. Or I guess it would be 1 minus and then multiply. So we can snug these color values in. Now we get a thing. Not really seeing it here. but let's just actually test it in the scene. Maybe that'll do something. Do I have like a play button from in here? I don't. That's annoying. So now if we come in and he gets aggro and he starts shooting, not really seeing... Okay, actually, before we go much further, I am going to grab this dingus and then increase his aggro distance to just be like 1,000, so that he's just always aggro. So I'm not really seeing the fade. Let me just plug this in directly. Let's see. Why did that material not change? Am I not actually using this material on your gut? Oh, that's why. I'm not actually using this dingus. Why are you not letting me set the material? Bullet hell orb. There we go. Now you're actually using the right material, but I'm not really seeing the screen fade. I'm gonna take these numbers down. Take them down by 10x. Oh, there it is. Now we're seeing it. Now we're seeing it. Zoop, zoop, zoop. 600 equals 6. Oh, that's in meters? That's... Wait. Yeah, no, I understand that that's in meters, but like, I've got 100 meters diameter in this arena. Okay, so now... Okay, yeah, that distance is like... That distance has to be way higher. Is it doing something like logarithmic depth? I don't think so. It's like, I mean, maybe, but it's like... It's always hard to tell when it's like, is the input linear or is like the color just in some nonlinear color space? But, this looks pretty good, right? Like it's black when it's close to him and then it's white when it's close to me. Maybe I don't need this start distance at all. Okay, we can take that distance up. And 4,000. We're approaching like the radius of the arena now. Yeah, that's looking okay. But if I get like really close to him, I'm not really seeing that much of a difference. Wonder if I like pass it through a power, if I can like push it up or down. The fact that gray is not linear to the eye too. Okay, squaring it is not great. I think I can... 50% looking at gray is like 18% value. Well, I mean, it depends if you're talking about sRGB gray or if you're talking about linear gray, but... Because, I mean, like, everytheverything is, like, then being tone mapped, right, by Unreal. So it's... you have to be, like, a little more careful about what you mean with all that stuff. Okay, here's where we're, like, pulling down the low end. So I think this is... To have middle gray, you put 0.18 in const is what I know. Yeah, well, I mean, it depends, like, because, like, here, if you're looking at a color, right, you can see there's two values here. Here, let me make like a gray color, and then you can see. So like if I do 50% saturation, right, you're going to get two values in here. You're going to get the sRGB value and you're going to get the linear value. Basically, perceptual 50% gray is going to be 50% in this sRGB value here, whereas like physically 50% luminance, like the light bulb has half as much light coming out of it, is going to be in this linear channel. So essentially everything gets linearized before it gets put into the shader, and then the output of the shader then gets tone mapped by Unreal's renderer to produce colors. So it goes through two transformations. So it always, whenever you say like, oh, in order to be gray, right, like probably what's happening is you're specifying linear values, but you really want the perceptual values, so you can't just put in 0.5, you have to put in the like pulled down value. But then, you know, depending on the tone mapping settings, it might not look like gray at all. It's all very wild. Anyway, I think at least to a first order of approximation, we appear to be going from black to white with a pretty nice ramp now. And like if I'm far away, there's like a longer stretch of black. So now if I multiply my colors, and now this multiply is not going to be perfect because like one of my colors here, like I said, is blown out and blooming. And so like I would need to multiply that by a very small value before I stop seeing it, but okay. We are at least now going from them being like basically black to like being basically red. Now let's, instead of just multiplying, let's lerp this. We're gonna, instead of going from 0 to 1, we're gonna go from like 0.5 to 1. Or I'll put in your 0.18 gray, since we're pulling numbers out of a hat. Okay, so we're getting a little bit better. I might multiply the two colors separately with two different multipliers. Yeah, I think that might be better. So we have these two color channels coming in. So let's take our gibberish here. Here, I'm just going to collapse this. We're just going to call these collapsed nodes screen fade. This is the thing that drives me crazy. In both material and like gameplay blueprints, you can always collapse nodes like this, and then you just double click to look at it. I don't know why people do this more. I don't know why they create these nests of blueprints. It seems like much more obvious. Anyway, I'm going to create two lerps here. We're going to do like 0.01, and I'm going to do maybe like 0.35. So this color, I'll multiply those two colors. Look, all that stuff in there. What is this? Wait. Oh, that was my old multiply. I don't need that anymore. Cool. So now I should be multiplying down the glowing light more intensely than I'm modulating the, where is it? Yeah. So I think that's pulling down the glowing channel a lot better. Yeah, so now we're getting them, they're a little darker in the distance, and then they're brighter when they're close up. I think that's pretty good. I think the last thing I want to do is I actually want to hue shift Is that a thing that I can do? Let's find out. Right click, hue shift, excellent. Here we're gonna go here. And then we're gonna grab our screen fade and when our screen fade is 0, we want to hue shift 0. Otherwise, I think maybe like 120 degrees, or I guess it's a percentage, right? Oh, that's way too much. I guess it says percentage, but it means ratio. That's obnoxious. Wait, this is looking green when it's very close. Do I've got these numbers backwards? Yeah, I do. Is 100% like 180 degrees? Yeah. So let's see. We should have like a full hue shift in the distance. Wait, it is. I do have them backwards. Ah! Okay. So this is going to be 0. I don't want to do maybe a full hue shift. Maybe we'll do like to like 0.5. Wait, no, I do have. Wait. What's happening here? Now that seems backwards. Up on the wrong screen. There we go. Okay, they're like blue in the distance, and then they become red when they that. It looks kind of silly, right? Maybe not too much hue shifting. Maybe just going from yellow to red is better. Or like maybe going from the other direction. -0.2. That's pretty cool. Okay, so now it's like purple in the distance, and then it's red up close. I do think on that one, I'm actually going to want to grab this and use a different hue start distance, and then we'll just say the hue start distance is 1,000. There we go, that's looking pretty nice. I think I don't actually need to modulate as much now. Okay, so that hopefully makes it like a little easier to tell these like. There's like more I want to do. I think like in the distance, like that rim shade is a little too crispy. I might want to modulate the power on that based on the screen fade as well, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. So we'll just say for now, this is pretty good. So we'll check that off, right? We have done an experiment. We played with the bullet shader. So I think the next thing that's like bothering me about this area of exclusion is that when I'm standing perfectly still, it can like get me. But when I'm drifting in the air, even this like slow drift is like fast enough to stay ahead of the like exclusion zone that's being made by those bullets. So Cluedots is showing lightning effects. Cool. So I can't believe that took a whole hour. Ugh. Well, I guess I was also just like talking my jaw sore this whole time. So I guess there's like a few different like experiments, right? Like one is like we can have the rotation of the bass be a lot tighter. Like right now it's low pass filtered so that it's not super snappy. What we could do is instead of because right now, here's the entire logic for how the like head on the tripod works. We like make sure we're aggro. Using an aggro component to get the position of the player, incidentally, as opposed to just like referencing the player and getting their position, is a little bit of like future-proofing against. I want to make sure that my game is like multiplayer ready, so I like never refer to the player using as some kind of singleton, like there's only one of them. I always say like, no, enemies are aware of a player through their sensors, and then they get all their information about the player that they're aware of from the sensor, and then it will like just work if it's like a multiplayer game. So Cluedots says, you predict future. Yeah, that's basically what we're going to do. It's like dead reckoning is, you know, sometimes what they call it. So I think my aggro component, I think I already wrote a helper for this, which is like, yeah, dead reckoning. So this one is, we're going to, so the bullet type, you can pull in, it like uses the properties of the bullet to know how much it should do. The muzzle position, I am using, this is my muzzle position. So I'm basically, right now, I'm just spawning the bullets 2.5 meters in front of the middle of the robot. I'll change that, but for now, that's my muzzle position. And then accuracy, if I recall, is just lerping between, let's see. Yeah, so this is basically just a multiplier on that, right? So I could say like maybe 50% accuracy. Well, we'll just say 1.0 for now and see what happens. But now, yeah, just to show you what's happening, I'm recompiling. I think this is the first time that I hot recompiled on this stream, so it's gonna take 30 seconds or something. But just to clarify for everybody at home what's happening, this like dead reckoning function that I wrote on the sensor is like used a whole bunch, and it's basically like, instead of shooting where the player is, I'm shooting at where I predict the player will be based on their current velocity, right? So if they're moving really fast, I'm gonna lead my shots like in a way more extreme way. Now I think this is gonna be a little bit crazy because these bullets are so slow, so that like the time to impact is actually gonna be huge. And so it's like actually going to be shooting way ahead of the player. I may need to drag this like accuracy ratio down to like compensate for like how slow these bullets are. Alternatively, I might like go in and just like do dead reckoning with a faster bullet than my actual bullets, but we'll see. Wow, this is taking a long time to compile. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now, as I go around, yeah, he's really trying a lot harder to look at me. He's moving, he's rotating pretty erratically. I mean, it does mean that like when I'm drifting in the air, he's able to get me. This is like, this is not producing, this is, I think part of this is like when I fall, you can see he like slams into the ground because he's not expecting me to hit the ground, and so he's like aiming below the ground. I've encountered that before, so I created this alternate version, which is Dead Reckoning Heriz. So for this, I need to specify the up direction. The reason I need to get the up direction is because I support changing gravity in my game, so I need to account for the fact that you might be walking around like a little Mario Galaxy moon or something. There is a pure function in the engine to predict it does collision. Yeah, I was like using some of that stuff, but it like I might, what's the function called again? I like used some of it before and it wasn't very good. I found some like old game programming gems articles that were a little better, but should be predict. I think like a lot of that stuff was like using their player controller, which I'm not using. Okay, it is not accounting vertically at all. So also, I don't love that it's like so snappy. I wonder if I do like my old version of Dead Reckoning. But I just yank the accuracy way down. Here, while this is compiling this time, I'm gonna look up that predict. Oop, well, that was fast. So you said it's predict. Let's just look for symbols with the word predict in their name. Simulation context, face. Kalman filters. That's interesting. Oop. Okay, it's got like the word predict shows up a whole lot because of network prediction. You determine future of player at what time. Okay, I can show you. It's I have a function that I wrote in Combat Util called Dead Reckoning. So basically we get the offset, right, of the target position from the muzzle position. And then given the offset, the relative velocity, basically like the player's velocity minus my velocity, and the bullet speed, which is how fast the bullets travel, we plug that into a function called time to impact. This is a function that, like, I did my own solution, but it was like unstable for some reason. And then I found like an old game developer article from like 2006 called Shooting a Moving Target, which basically is doing the same thing that I was doing, which is like, here, if I open up my little drawing program here, so we can come in here, like, here's my position, here's the target position, here's the relative velocity, right? Which is just the target's position minus my position, right? So the target might be standing still, but because bullets inherit my velocity, I have to subtract my velocity from it, right? You're gonna get this offset, right? Which is like, x is equal to some time to impact times the speed of the bullets, right? And then this is where I'm gonna shoot, right? And basically from this, right, so this is like offset, this side is like time to impact times the speed of the bullet. You can, like, I forget, there's like one more, what's the extra parameter here? But essentially it's it comes down to a discriminant, which happens to be a solution to the whatchamacallit, yeah, like what are all the parameters here? But it comes down to basically being a quadratic formula solution. So you have offset, you have the relative velocity dotted with the offset, and then you have the relative velocity minus the like bullet speed. So like, yeah, this is basically, sorry, this is the time to impact times the relative velocity. We can like zoom in here. I can like erase, oh my goodness. Let me draw this picture over. Okay, here's how it works. Here's the player position. Here is the target's current position, right? Here is where the target will be in some time in the future, right? This is the time to impact. So this side of the triangle is the relative velocity of the target times the time to impact. This vector is the velocity of the bullet times the time to impact. And this side is just your the distance, the starting distance from you to the target, right? And so between all these parameters, you can apply a thing called the law of cosines to basically solve what should t be. Like you can like go through here to get like the derivation of all the math for it, but I can tell you it's going to wind up being like a quadratic equation, right? Which means you're going to get something of the form b squared plus or minus square root of, what is it, 2a or like a squared minus 4ac divided by 2a, right? Is going to be the solution to the time to impact. So you can see we computed ABC, these coefficients, which were determined by the law of cosines. And then from that, you can determine like what the time to impact should be. And then in my aim ahead, I'm like, compute the time to impact. If I can't compute the time to impact, then basically just, you know, do an approximation based on your relative position and the bullet speeds, because essentially if this part right here, this thing called the discriminant, or rather the part inside the discriminant is less than 0, then this is a complex solution, which means there's no real solution, which means there is no firing solution. There is no way for you to shoot, right? Like if this is moving away from you faster than your bullet travels, for instance, there's no solution to that. So you need to account for the fact that like, well, maybe there's no solution, in which case you should just aim ahead with some approximate value. Otherwise, we're going to do this like, whatchamacallit, time to impact stuff. So all that stuff gets plugged in, and then you can see I basically just have in my aggro sensor component, I know your position, I know your last relative velocity, because you told me what type of bullet you have, I know what your bullet speed is, right? And then this accuracy is just a multiplier on that time to impact that we compute. Hopefully that answers your question. So way out here in the AI code, all I need to know is this is my type of bullet, this is where I'm shooting from, and this is the ratio that I want to put on the accuracy. That's going to give me some amount of dead reckoning here. Anyway, this isn't working out super great. So shooting time. Yeah, so I'm just shooting directly forward. So I'm wondering if like maybe we don't just shoot directly forward. Maybe we shoot towards the player instead of doing so much dead reckoning out here. Oh no, somebody has jumped in and started spamming the chat. Let me see if I remember how to deal with them. view. Sorry about this. Block. Okay. Cool. Spam in the chat. Block. Okay. I should really figure out how to do that more efficiently. I wish there was a way for that to actually disappear. Okay, there we go. It was predict projectile path. Search symbols, gameplay, statics. Predict projectile path. What does this code do? Whoa, look how much more complicated their function is than mine. So they are going to get the world. So now they're going to get gravity. So this is already a function that I can't use because I do my own gravity, unlike Unreal, which just has constant Z gravity. Projectile radius. Our query params, add ignored actor. Okay, like construct some query params. We have the launch velocity, we have the start location, we have the current time, predict result, and then it has like a little simulation here. What are they doing in here? They are sweeping this object, and they're basically, they just have a loop, and they are taking the current velocity, right, and then they're sweeping in this loop. And they're basically doing a bunch of like collision sweeps. Predict params. So how are they determining max sim time? Oh, that's just the thing that's being specified. Predict result. Maximum simulation time. Yeah, it looks like this is predicting where the projectile is going to be. Yeah, this is predicting the path of a projectile, not predicting the position of a target. Suggest. Gives us a launch velocity. So this is assuming that you're able to modify the launch. Yeah, this one they're specifying time to target. But where are they actually getting? To hit a specific point. Yeah, I don't see them actually doing any actual dead reckoning with the target. Anyway, I can look at that later. Folks at home, that's all in uGameplay statics, which is the like giant god class that has all the like basic blueprint helper functions. Well, my face has gotten kind of dark. Let me turn the light on. Cool. Oh, I see what you're saying. You're like saying like that's predicting that the player is a projectile, not the thing that you're shooting. So I wonder if I'd get a more stable result if I just did aggro component get last aggro position plus just some fixed time aggro component, because I think the like get last aggro velocity. Let's try something dumber. Let's not try anything that's based on the speed of the bullets. Let's just try and like get a point that's like a fixed prediction ahead of the player. So now, okay, my like acceptance test, which is that if I'm drifting, it can hit me, is like not working. So let's try and increase this amount of time. Maybe 1.25. Draw a debug sphere. Okay. See it in 3D. That's fine. I can already see where my notes are. But all I want is to say like if I'm drifting, it should be able to catch up and hit me. So yeah, okay. That's working. Maybe like 2 seconds of prediction is enough. And then I think actually what I'm going to do is let's actually split this. Let's get like target vel vertical is aggro component get last aggro velocity. Target vel is that. This is returning like a reference type, right? Yeah. And then the velocity vertical is just target velocity dot project onto normal upder. Target vel horizontal is just, oh my god, why are my fingers so jittery today? Target vel minus target vel vertical. And then the position I'm going to target is going to be the current position plus 2 seconds times target vel horizontal plus only a half second times target vel vertical. So I'm just going to like extrapolate horizontally a bit more than I extrapolate vertically. Mechanical keyboard, it pops in my ears. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Maybe I just need to take my microphone down a little bit. Beep boop. So now if I'm just drifting, eventually, oh man, that 2 seconds actually makes him very, very poppy. How did that happen? Maybe just 1.1. Bring us back to show you what we're waiting on. Cool. So now if I'm just drifting, eventually he hits me. Boom. And I think another thing I want to do is actually clamp this. Get clamped to size. I think it's get clamped to max size, right? There we go. Here, I might split this line out, maybe a few lines, just to make it more readable. So now we'll just take their position. We'll extrapolate a little bit horizontally and a little bit vertically, but not too much. Hopefully that'll stop it from like getting twitchy when I'm dodging. Yeah, that seems pretty good, but it can still hit me. Do I need the multiplier on the vertical one to be a bit higher? So now we come in, he's able to hit me, I go up, or like if I'm just like drifting a little bit to the side. It's not really able to keep up vertically, I wonder why that is. Now he's a little bit ahead. Here, let's do that time to impact calculation. Aim ahead, time to impact. So the offset is, here, let's get target position. Relative velocity is target velocity. And then the bullet speed. And this time to impact, this does -1 on failure, right? Yeah. We're just going to say min time. Actually, let's just say fmath max of this and 0. Oof. And then for these, we're going to take the min. That ensures that we never overshoot. This is this is how experimental code looks. Like usually, like it gets longer and longer and longer and more complicated and more finicky, and then I have an aha moment and it gets really short again. But now, okay, so he's not having trouble hitting us when we're drifting. Except when he is. Look at that. Look how close you are. Is it just that we need these like bullets to be bigger? So there's like properties of the bullets that I can handle here. It's just filtered by bullet. So many things are called bullet. Where's the actual... I type bullet manager. Oh my goodness. What was the category that I not in a special category. It's in a category called Bullet Manager. Why is this so hard to find? Here it is, here it is, here it is. So, maximum distance, 75 meters, bullet speed, 2,000, bullet scale, and collision radius is 10. What if we increase the collision radius to 25? So they're half a meter wide. Okay, that's hitting us a little bit better. Still skimming by. Maybe scale them up a little bit. Oh my god, why did all these expand again? Oh, that's so annoying. 20% bigger. Oop. Why are you so bad? Okay, so I think this aiming logic is actually pretty good. But let's see here. I think instead of using the current rotation, let's use the, yeah, here we go. This is the target rotation. What happens if instead of using the current rotation of the character, we use the target rotation of the character? Because like what's happening is that like I move the target and then the character resolves that. What if we just use the target as the direction rather than the slowly resolve, so it can actually do slightly differently? Now it hits us a little more reliably. It's not producing the stream that I like. So actually, here, let's definitely ask questions if you want to know what I'm doing, but I'm basically right now making the rotation of the middle of the character tighter. Line 95 encapsulates lines 96 to 100. What? Oh yeah, I do this sometimes where like I stack my if statements, because like if there's no braces on an if, it will take a single statement and then that single statement is just another if. This is like useful if some of your if statements have declarations in them, which is like a C++ 17 thing. You can't like, I can't like introduce this as like a clause in like an and statement. So sometimes I just split them out like this. But I hate having if statements that go deeper and deeper and deeper. So this is my own little coding style. Anyway, let's just make the position.rot vector. Okay. So make this a little tighter. Yeah, even with it having that tighter rotation. Wait, was it still doing the old one? Okay, it's still doing this one. Yeah, I think I don't love having like tighter aiming because it just introduces these discontinuities. So if we see it shooting in one direction and I dodge and it's shooting in another direction. I liked it when they were more of a stream. So actually, here's what I'm going to do instead. We're going to slow down how it's doing its business. Compile all that, come back in here. Now it should be kind of missing. I think instead what we're going to do is, instead of having it shoot straight forward, let's try and have it, let's like actually start doing this. So like this is nicer in that like even when it jerks around a little bit, like there's still a sort of a coherent shape to the like bullets, which I think is like important for legibility. So let's instead just do a thing. Can you turn around him but close to him? Okay, well what I'm doing is like I have him rotate slower as you get closer and closer to him. And then I've also, where was it? Yeah, like you can see here, I get the horizontal distance from you to him. And if you're within 5 meters of it, only when you're more than 5 meters away from him, do I actually update the pivot target. Otherwise, he just points in the same direction. So if I like walk between their legs, they don't like snap around exactly. Like if I'm like pretty close, they move slower. But when I'm further away, then their rotation is like fully snapping. That goes up to like 2,000. I can probably like pull that down. I don't know. These are all magic numbers for now. I don't want to like over-tune it. But I think what I'm going to do is, there is length 2D to get horizontal normally. Yeah, so I have the custom up direction, so I have to project the offset onto the plane of the up direction and then get the size. 2D would only give me if the up direction was up and down. Like, just to sort of like show you what that's all for, right? Like, if I do, I think I have moon gym, what was it? I have a map here. Gyms, where was it? Like, here's ring gym, here's an example. I was thinking of making like ring-shaped colonies. So this is like an example where you see as you fly around, the scene rotates, right? Because I'm always sort of like pointed out away from the middle of the colony. This is like one example of like gravity changing on you. So there's like a lot of like built-in Unreal Engine things that are sort of like I had to build my own version for, specifically because I wanted to have changing velocity. Recent levels, bullet hell gem. Another one is like if I go to like, where was it? My tutorial level is actually like a moon. And this is nice because I don't have to have boundaries. It's when people are learning to fly, it's nice if they can just fly forever in any direction. Yeah, it's totally like Mario Galaxy. So like if I spawn in here, you can see I can just fly around this little planet. And I've actually got scenes where I actually have like big enemies tromping around on here. And then like the most extreme case is if I go to my deep space gem, this is handling when the up direction is just totally zero, like I'm in 0G. And so now I have to like basically account for the fact that there is no up direction, right? And so like whenever I'm swinging the camera, I have to use like an axis angle from to rotation to determine which way to go, because there's like no up at all. So just a little peek at some of the other stuff that I've been working on. But let's go back to the bullet hell gym. Yeah, this one just happens for now to be in like a flat world, but you can imagine it might change. Let me hide this outer barrier. That's annoying because it looks pretty like this. So I think what I'm going to do is, instead of having just like a straightforward stream of bullets, let's do an experiment where we fire them more rapidly, right? So They're all like double the rate of fire. Doubling the rate of fire means halving the turn between bullets. They're like reciprocals. And laser, LOL. I do have, here I can show you, I'll do like a follow-up to what we were doing. I have a, yeah, here we go. This was what we were working on the stream last week. That's it. You can see I was already starting to think about what happens when there's like mobs of guys. It's like kind of annoying when there's like the squad is too big. And so I like, what if there's a special power-up called the super laser, which is used to basically like dispatch squads, right? The other way to deal with it is there's like weapon upgrades. Now you see I've got like 3 parallel bullets. But if he shoots me, then I like lose my weapon upgrade. So the idea is that we're layering these two things like I was saying before. So there's spawners that are flooding the zone with little guys, and then there's the big guy who's putting out bullet patterns which create areas of exclusion. And so the tension comes because you're dealing with two things at once. So like in this bullet hell gym, we'll have this dingus who, I want to give him some movement logic so he maintains distance from you. Reminds me of the boss from Warframe. Yeah, Warframe's definitely like one of the things that we were looking at when we were working on Solar Ash. And I like sort of remembered a lot about it, of like things that I liked, things that I didn't like, and like wanted to do differently. So there's Wings 2. Yes, theirs are like a little more like limited, but my thing is like basically there's like 3 different fighters, right? So right here's like the main. I'm actually doing a game with parkour moves from Warframe. Yeah, we tried to do a lot of that kind of like Prince of Persia style wall running and stuff. It's really tricky to get right. You kind of have to build the whole game around it. You know, like you have to do like full Mirror's Edge. Otherwise it kind of just plays as more of a gimmick. But that's just my personal opinion. But like anyway, like we've been playing with this one dingus right now, but if I go into my like world settings, you can see I've also got like spider tank. So this one, there is no sort of flying, but he does have like a zip line and can crawl around like on the surface as these dinguses, or like hide on the wall. So also has like more of a charge attack than like a rapid fire attack. And then the last character is Eden Endymion, who instead of a transformation just goes into this like sort of loop-de-loop mode where you can do like sort of full. Controlling this with a mouse is so annoying. I need to. This is my like least refined character controller. Oh my goodness. But like yeah, right now her speed is just crazy. But you can see she's like glass cannon character. She is the least well developed. My plan for early access is that like the transforming robot will be unlocked for the first early access demo. Eventually I'll unlock the spider tank when I feel that he's gotten to a good point, and then I'll unlock Eden as the last one, because I think she's the craziest. Like because she's so fast, I've just got like a lot more work to do in making her more controllable. But like she should be fun in terms of like taking any of these challenges to 11 by being like, oh, also like you're a glass cannon and like you have like no health. So, but like hopefully like she would also be the show-off character, right? Where you can like speed run the levels if you're really good. Cool. So now what I want to do is basically add in like a random spray so that it's not just shooting forward, it's like spraying a bit. So let's just say like here's X, And then we can say spray is, I'm pretty sure I did, here wait, let me look in my, my player has spray, so I think I wrote a helper function for this. Thanks for watching the screen, Cludas, and for all the cool tips about stuff that Unreal already does. But, fighter, weapon, bullet shooter. Yeah, I have wiggle orientation. Here we go. So I can say X is combat util. This is util functions that I've written. Wiggle direction. And then there's the base direction. And then spray angle. What is spray angle in? These are fed into rotator. Okay, so these are in degrees. So let's do like a 10-degree spray. Maybe make these bullets fire even more rapidly. What time is it, by the way? Oh my goodness, it's after 2 o'clock. I'm just gonna say, I think what's gonna happen with making them faster and making them have spray is it's gonna compensate when I'm in the air and make it more consistently able to hit me. Okay, yeah, so now... Cool, and if we limit that so it's not so wild, only do 5 degrees. That's 5 degrees half angle, so 10 degrees total. Because that's 5 degrees away from your like middle direction. Yeah, now, between like giving it like a little bit of dead reckoning and a little bit of like spray randomness, it's able to like hit me if I'm just like standing here, right? I shouldn't, over the long period of time, be able to just do that. I also wonder, what if those bullets were just a pinch faster? We'll do 2500, which is actually the player's afterburner speed. Okay, this is pretty good. And incidentally, the way that I'm able to consistently, like, barrel roll through it is because there's actually, like, iframes on barrel roll. So I can, like, slip past the bullets by doing that with good enough timing. So that's pretty good. I'm liking that, I'm liking that, I'm liking that. So I think the last thing that I want to do for this stream is just, this guy's been stationary this whole time. I actually want to update him so that he actually travels around the arena. So let's come in here. I'm going to say, when you spawn, I'm going to at least for now, just get your Z position. I'm gonna add to do account for gravity. And then basically, I'm gonna have you like horizontally move around relative to the player, so that like, so it helps that like the middle of the arena is at like 0, 0. So I'm basically at all times just gonna say like whatever like your whatever angle the player makes like with the arena, I want to make like the opposite angle, right? So I should actually also save here rest distance horizontal. we'll just say rest distance horizontal is pose.position.size 2D. My to-do notice above these, add some white space so I know what that's referring to. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say what do we have here? Const auto target from center equals target position dot here we're just gonna say to do account for arena offset. Target position minus the center. Get safe normal. I'm going to say my move to target position, or the move to position to discriminate it from target, which is like your aggro target, is going to be the center minus target dir from center rest distance horizon times that oh my goodness, jittery hands again. This should be a comma instead of a period. Just going to here say pose.damp position. So pose is just my position and velocity represented as a structure. In my AI, this is how I determine where I want the actor to be moved to, and then that's resolved into a real actor position when I actually do the dynamics for the character. But this is how I indicate where I want to move. And I'm using damp position, where instead of just setting the position that I want the actor to move to, I'm actually low pass filtering it, right? So I'm slowly blurring it out. It's as though your position and the target position are connected by a spring, and I'm pulling you on a leash towards it rather than snapping you there. So you want to go to move to position over, let's say it takes on average about 1 second to get there. After we change the position, then I'm going to get this muzzle position. So there's a little bug right there. That's fine. Okie dokie. Just waiting for it to compile. C++ always runs slow when I'm streaming because I do not have that powerful of a computer. Now let's relaunch. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Where are you going? Where are you going? What's happening? There we go. Expression did not evaluate to a constant. That's weird. That's totally a constant. leave it alone for now. I guess they didn't mark the constructor for f vector as const expert. Okay, so here we are. Let me just move my window back into place. We can hide this dingus. Now look at him go. He's just gonna like run to the opposite side. He is, I think 1 second was a little too fast. I think I have a like damp with max speed parameter. So let's say it takes him 3 seconds, and let me check, make sure. Yes, I can specify max speed. So it's target, then max speed, then duration. We're gonna say your max speed is like 10 meters per second. Just to clarify, because like I'm a giant robot, 10 meters per second doesn't seem that fast. It's like, well, you have to imagine that the player is 1 meter tall. That's how I measure everything, right? So this is like, he moves 10 player heights in a second. So anyway, basically all this should do is like when I'm standing on one side of the arena, the big robot should just always be moving to the other side of the arena to like maintain distance from me. And now that I've kicked off a live recode, my computer is seizing up in terror. There we go. Yeah, so if I move here, they're gonna move over there. If I move over here, they're going to move over there. He's moving, he's just like consistently not hitting me. That's curious. I wonder what's going on there. Like when I'm standing on the ground, very curious what's happening there. Okay, so if I like move close to them, they're gonna move over there. That's also, oh, it's just taking them a long time to flip around. I wonder, maybe 0.75 is a better like low end time, or like minimum time for them to turn around when they're close to me. Maybe I need to account for that here as well, now that I actually have a velocity. Oh, that is true, because I am spawning the bullets with their velocity. I think this will make them hit me a bit better even though oh, they still appear to be shooting way off. What does that feel like? I'm not talking right now because I'm just like observing what's happening in the scene. I'm trying to decide like, is there buggy behavior or does this make sense? And also just generally, is this a fun game? Am I making something fun right now or am I just making something visually stimulating? Why are you shooting way above me? I wonder if I just don't shoot those with ear velocity. So if we get rid of minus pose velocity here, and I just zero this out. Okay, yeah, it appears to be that like inheriting its velocity was causing that. I think it's better for like these bullets for them to like not inherit velocity, but to just use the like aiming solution that we came up with. Okay, yeah, now as it's moving around, it's still hitting me a lot better. That's more what I expected to happen. Okay, I think this is like maybe a good place to stop for now. I had hoped to get into doing more interesting bullet patterns, like creating like shock waves that make the ground dangerous to stand on, or like stuff in the air that makes like the air dangerous to fly around in. That'll be, or like doing like a helix that creates a tunnel and you're like stuck inside the tunnel. So that's what I'm gonna do next, but you know, you may notice how like twitchy I am at typing because I think my blood sugar is low because I haven't had lunch today. This is a longer stream than normal, but thanks for watching. This is pretty fun. I do this every Friday, noon Pacific time, live from Los Angeles. There's, if you check out, there's a link to our Discord in the info. There should also be a link to our Steam page, wishlist early, wishlist often. And yeah, I'm basically right now, my #1 goal is to get an early access build cut. But I don't just want to like have an early access demo, which is just the control tutorial. So I want there to be like 2 or 3 distinct challenge levels. Like one is just crazy and one is more puzzle like, and one is more arcade like, just so that people get more a taste of like what the full version is going to look like and don't like get a little too like overly drawn in on like one specific level. But you know, I would muchly prefer people to like just be playing this than to just see sizzle footage like on like Twitter and Blue Sky, but it's very tricky. I'm just making it all on my own. But yeah, this is great. And it'll be up on BOD, it'll be up on YouTube if you missed any parts of this. And yeah, have a good weekend. Bye.